we're not going to do a traditional kind of opening, coin flip, who starts, and all that type of thing, because I think we've been there, done that, and have the T-shirt. So this question is going to start with you, Commissioner Matlow. As we all know, Andrew Gillum is in the headlines as of late last week. He was indicted recently, right, if you hadn't heard about it. So he endorsed you, Commissioner, for your first round. And Gillum, the former mayor, claims that this indictment is a political hit job. So my question to you to open this up is, do you agree with your friend?
I'd start
2 minutes.
Sure. Let me start by saying this is exactly what we've been trying to say for the last 4 years. Corruption in our city has run rampant. And I think we got to start by saying it's not a Democrat problem. It's not a Republican problem. If it's your team, my team, none of that matters. What we need to fix in Tallahassee transcends above any individual person. You know, I've been told for 4 years that corruption in Tallahassee was the result of one person, that there's no more corruption because Scott Maddox was indicted and went to jail. If we look at what's played out in our city over the last few years, we know that's not true. We know it's not true because of what was revealed in the FBI investigation. We saw text messages from a lot of political players trying to put in place city managers, trying to put in place Ben Pinnegree at Blueprint. All those people are still employed at the city of Tallahassee. And yes, there were text messages between Andrew Gillum and Scott Maddox as well. We can't hide from that. Do I think the FBI conducts investigations to be political? No, I don't. I don't think that's the case. But as we look at what's happened in our community, we have to find the solutions and we have to work together to get there. And we've been called uncivil for raising these issues. We've been attacked repeatedly and told to move on and move forward. And I'm not going to move on until we have an honest and transparent government in the city of Tallahassee. Thank you.
Dr. Bellamy, same question for you. What does this indictment say about Tallahassee politics and government? And what would you do, to change the dynamics that we're addressing here?
Well, first off, I'd like to apologize for not pre-registering. I don't think this is necessarily new news. I think many of us thought this was coming. I'm not surprised by it. So again, it's not a shocking revelation that it occurred. I think what we've got to do is expect more of the people that run for office. You've got to elect people that are always honest, truthful, straightforward, or don't complain when you get politicians in office who are not honest, straightforward, and truthful. And I do feel the need to point out that much of Jeremy's campaign has often been, look who's connected with Maddox, who's connected with the corruption. Using that same rationale, I would be saying you shouldn't be in office because of your connection to Gillum. I don't think that's the case. I don't think you knew anything about Gillum, but it does need to be pointed out that the very things you say about me in regards to people who got into trouble could be said about you, and hopefully we can set all that aside and start talking about the issues.
Right. Rebuttal? 1 minute.
Yes, and we're having two different conversations here. One about what happened in 2018, which I think the courts will settle 100% completely, and one about campaigns we're engaging in right now. In Tallahassee, we've had a closed political system where the same big money, the same special interests flood hundreds of thousands of dollars into campaigns. And what do they get in rewards for it? You can just go look at the city's checkbook and see millions of dollars in public contracts going to companies from the board of directors of the Chamber of Commerce. Why does that happen? Because they flood money into people's campaigns. And he wants to hide from his connections to Scott Maddox, but the truth is, all of Scott Maddox's funders, all of the big money is flowing into his campaign. He just started a political committee that's funded by a developer that was in the FBI text messages asking for special favors, and Scott Maddox said he could get it done. And before Scott Maddox went to prison, he was reaching out to people on David Bellamy's behalf. So no, I do think it's relevant to this conversation.
Did you want to rebut that?
I don't know who he was reaching out to on my behalf, but he didn't reach out to me. Again, it's not relevant. If you can have a close relationship with Gillum, I can have a distant one with Maddox.
Okay, so since we're talking mayors, let's stay along that vein. Dr. Bellamy, both of you were here last month for our mayoral debate. So you had a chance to listen to the candidates. You both have seen their campaigns. Dr. Bellamy, who are you going to support for mayor and why?
So I am staying in my own lane. I've got my own race to run, and I'm not getting involved in the other two. I have been friends with Daley since we were kids. We weren't close friends. We grew up with our parents working alongside. My mom was the mayor when his dad was on the school board. And I love Christian Dozier's parents. I don't know her well, but I'm staying out of that. I've got my own race to run.
Commissioner Matlow, the same question for you.
Sure, and it was a pleasure attending that debate, and I love it when there's multiple candidates, because you can really see people who you never expected to run for office, like Michael Abraham, who I thought put on a tremendous showing. I mean, the unfortunate reality in politics is big money and connections really will drive people to the top, and I think that's unfortunate. But right now, I don't think I'm looking for a candidate and mayor that's going to step up and be the leader our community deserves, to end corruption, get rid of people who are doing bad things, get your hands off of political procurements, get the political hand off of hires, and lead with integrity. Right now, I don't see a candidate for mayor that stepped up to fill that role.
Okay. So let's before we go off the mayor and go to something else here, what happens if Mayor Daley does get reelected? And this is for you, Commissioner Matlow. I mean, how will you work with Mayor Daley to build consensus?
Sure, and people love to play up division and where people butt heads, and where we butt heads, I think, are on the most important issues in our community. But the truth is, me and John Daley have found a lot of common ground. We worked hand in hand to deliver the ethics reform package. We pushed that into a majority. It had a lot of public opposition. I was disappointed he wouldn't help us close the lobbyist loophole, but nevertheless, there were a lot of great reforms that expanded the impact of the Independent Ethics Board, and we accomplished real things. We worked together on the Teams unit. So when law enforcement responds to mental health issues, it's not there's somebody with mental health training background. There's a firefighter, because we're looking at our community holistically and how we can stop locking people up who maybe need mental health treatment. And there's various other issues that we work hand in hand on. People don't like to put that on the front page. Conflict always rides to the top. So where can find common ground with the mayor, where he wants to work with me, and where I can work with him, we'll continue to do that. That's what we've done for the last 4 years.
Okay. Dr. Bellamy, do you believe that Commissioner Matlow is a consensus builder? And what would you do differently if elected?
I don't think he's a consensus builder. I think he means well with what he wants to do, but I don't think he has the ability to really compromise, to make deals, to reach across the aisle. I think his behavior has demonstrated that it's got to be his way or it won't get done. And I think that's a problem. You've got to be able, you said bumping heads. I love bumping heads. I've never read a book about a good general who didn't sit down with his staff and tell them what the plan was and make every single one at the table tell them what was wrong with it. That's how you grow. That's how you get better ideas. But you've got to be willing to reach across the aisle. Who knows what kind of compromise could have been reached if Jeremy had returned the call of the boosters president. You can't work with the police department if you won't talk with the police chief. So I think he means well, but meaning well might as well be at the bottom of a bottomless pit. You've got to bring results, and you've got to be able to compromise and deal with people.
1 minute, please.
Thank you, Patrick. And honestly, I'm proud of the bipartisan consensus that we've been able to build this community on some of the most detrimental issues, both the children's services tax. I was opposed to this tax because I said it would be another slush fund, just like Blueprint, where well-connected people would get their hands in it. The first results just came out, and the Chamber of Commerce is getting $100,000 of children's money. That to me is ludicrous. And if you go on the website that's being funded, it says on it, this website is not designed for children. I've also built a broad partisan coalition working with Barney Bishop to oppose that. And everything we said about the tax came true. We built a bipartisan coalition to oppose funding for a $27 million giveaway to Doak Campbell Stadium with Americans for Prosperity, because 80% of our community doesn't want to see us waste our money like that. Consensus is happening in our community. It's just a lot of times our leaders aren't voting what the consensus of our community is.
Did you want to add to that? No, a minute, please.
Just again, I think with compromise, being able to reach across aisles, having relationships that work, something could have been done about Doak Campbell. When you vote against the mayor pro tem just out of spite, you've burned a bridge. If you ever need the mayor pro tem to support you on something, you've got to be able to work within the system to achieve.
Commissioner Matlow, you brought up the lobbying component. I understand it's going to be coming up for a vote on lobbying and whether or not you can hire ex-felons. So there's some insinuations as to who might get hired down the road. So what would be your position on that? And then Dr. Bellamy, I'd ask for your follow-up on that as well.
Sure. First off, I don't think it's an insinuation. It's on Dr. Jackson's shirt, front and center. We can laugh at the shirt, I believe, but the issue is serious, right? There have been people who have been engaged in very serious wrongdoing, abusing their public office, abusing their behind-the-scenes connections in the community to get things done, and not doing it in the public eye. And I'm very afraid that when people get out of prison in just a couple of years, the people that they put in place at city government will still be there, and they'll be able to lobby those individuals. That's not going to change in 3 years. It's not going to change in 5 years. So I've been on the record, and I wholeheartedly support a lifetime ban on registering to lobby the city of Tallahassee from people convicted of felonies, especially honest services fraud.
Dr. Bellamy, same question.
I agree completely. We should have a law that says if you have committed a felony, especially one of trust, you shouldn't be able to lobby. A lot of the other lobbyist issues I think are pretty simple. If you get paid to go talk to a commissioner on someone's behalf, you're a lobbyist and you should register. But I think we need some consistency in that. I remember last year when I came and Jeremy said we've got to end these relationships where you have a campaign manager who's also a close confidant, who's also a lobbyist, who's also your advisor. I agree completely, but in 2019, I believe Mr. Hurley tried to get $35,000 to lobby for CRA money for somebody. You've got to be consistent. If we're not going to deal with lobbyists that are also our friends, our business partners, our campaign people, then we do it across the board. But lobbying should not be that hard to fix. If you get paid to try to influence a commissioner, you're a lobbyist, and if you've committed a felony involving public trust, or maybe any felony for that matter, you should receive a lifetime ban. And for that matter, there should be substantial penalties for breaking the lobbying rules. When you get paid $10,000 to lobby and your fine is $500, it sounds like just the cost of doing business. So we've got to put in substantial penalties for those that break the lobbying rules.
Okay. I'm going to start off with you, Commissioner, on a different aspect. NEBA was created in part and parcel because of deficits of the Tallahassee Chamber. You know, the membership, there's different opinions on different aspects of the chamber, but there's a part of us that believe that NEBA is more of an advocate because we don't have as many ties to municipalities, let's say. So I'd be interested in your assessment of the Tallahassee Chamber and how it benefits the community and working with the city.
Sure. I think that there's a lot of value in the Tallahassee Chamber, but I think the way they interact with the city government is not valuable to the community at large. I've never heard a concern come from the Tallahassee Chamber that spoke to the needs of local small businesses. I am a small business owner. I know what our needs are, and I bring those issues to the forefront, but I don't see the chamber stepping up on those. I see the chamber getting in line to support Doak Campbell. I see the chamber getting in line to support, certain vendors that their board members have contracts with, but I don't see them looking after the community at large. What I appreciate about NEBA is the people in the room are the people who are operating businesses and going through the struggles every day and really know the impacts. I don't think the chamber even recognizes the impact that Amazon coming to town was going to have on small and local businesses. Does that mean we should say Amazon shouldn't come to town? No, I don't think so. But if we're not thinking about the impacts of 1,000 new jobs in a city where we can barely find employees right now, where we're close to full employment with 3%, that's not even a conversation on their minds. And if you're representing a vast majority of business in Tallahassee, that should be the forefront. That's what we're concerned about. How are we going to fill jobs? How are we going to transition into the new environment after this pandemic? So, I stand with open arms. My door has always been open to the chamber to come and talk about issues that affect the community broadly, the business community broadly, but they've never reached out to have those types of conversations.
Dr. Bellamy, what's your assessment of the Tallahassee Chamber and the business community?
So I don't do much with the chamber as a doctor. I think we're members of it. I think one of our CEOs sits on the board, but my only involvement with the chamber was getting turned down for Leadership Tallahassee about 15 years ago. I do think that they need to work on their image, and I'm hoping they've realized that. They've got sort of the first outsider president I think we've had in a long time in Sammy. I think the chamber membership needs to decide, is the chamber doing for them what they want? And if it's not, they need to vote in new leadership or come on over to NEBA. But it's a private group that needs to figure out what they want to do. And if they feel like their interests aren't being represented, then they need to vote other people in. I agree, it looks like the chamber does a better job of serving the upper top. I'll be honest though, I don't know what they're doing for the smaller business. Maybe nothing, maybe a lot, I don't know. But I do think that if the membership's unhappy, the membership can control who runs it.
But
Or the membership can come over here, that's fine.
just on
Go
point,
ahead,
isn't that the problem though? A chamber's number one mission should be what they do for their membership, and Dr. Bellamy doesn't even know what they're doing for their membership, even though all the previous chairs of the chamber are supporting his campaign. Do they not talk about it? I mean, that's an issue that needs to be brought to light, because the chamber has had a heavy hand in everything that's happened in our local government. They're doing job switches for boards of directors at different agencies with elected officials. They're working behind the scenes on all kinds of things. And the main focus that they should be focused on are businesses. None of us can even tell you what they're doing.
Can I say something? I mean, you shouldn't be surprised when they donate to me when you attacked them. That shouldn't be a glaring surprise to anybody. When you make a video saying, I'm coming for you so-and-so, I'm coming for you so-and-so, that's a bed you then have to lie in. And the other thing is, it keeps coming up who's donated to me. And I think some of that's because Jeremy's upset that a lot of people that are donating to me donated to him the first time when he portrayed himself as someone different, when he said he was for the CSC. So yes, there's a lot of people donating to me, but I tell you, one of the greatest fundraisers I've had is you. When you offend people like that, you shouldn't be surprised when they donate to me.
And just to follow up on that, I may have offended Talcor 1, Talcor 2, Talcor 3, Talcor 4, Talcor 5, but that's the problem with our political system is he's talking about companies that never gave to my campaign because I haven't taken money from Stack LLCs. If you own 15 companies, I'm not taking a $1,000 check from each one of you because I think you want something in return for that. And when I look at no-bid land deals that are happening in Tallahassee where no realtors have the opportunity to put that land out and you're getting 6% a commission when nobody else even bid it out, that's a problem. Those are the issues I'm willing to stand up to that Dr. Bellamy's not. But he talked about attacking the chamber. Sometimes saying the unpleasant truth feels like an attack. Scott Maddox very much feels like I attack him. because I say what he has done in our community. My letter about the chamber spoke directly to them completely ignoring the corruption in our community. They were going to have a beach vacation at Amelia Island right when indictments were rolling in. And who did they have? Gary Jordan was the MC. True Leave, associated with JT Burnett, was front and center on it. Companies and people were there that had admitted to paying bribes in a federal investigation, and nobody would act like it even existed. That's not me attacking the chamber. That's me saying, work with us. We can work together to fix this, but we need y'all to come along because we can't do it alone.
Did you want to?
Yeah, I didn't get a tone of work with us in that letter to the editor. You know, I think part of the reason money is out of control now is partly due to you and Max. Once you opened Pandora's box and started taking PAC money from out of the state in previous elections, it changed everything. Elections will never be the same here again. And yes, so it makes it so it's if you don't want to take PAC money like that, you've got to raise money. I'm happy to say my donors are pretty much all local.
All right, let's move on. Let's move on, and if you want to rebut in closing. But I think we addressed it, and just for the record, NEBA and the chamber does have a good working relationship where it makes sense for the business community. So we do have some interfacing with them, but I think like anyone else, any other group in the business community, we can always raise our game and have a balanced conversation. And this leads me to you, Dr. Bellamy, in asking the question of, do you believe the city of Tallahassee is business friendly? You hear these horror stories about permitting, for example, and trying to get a permit, and the months it takes when instead of weeks. We just don't feel on some levels that it's, and I'm speaking on my behalf as well, that it could be more business friendly. Do you agree with that or not? And please elaborate.
Absolutely, it could be more business friendly. Permitting is just one of the things. I have no problem with very strict permitting rules, but I believe that if you meet those criteria, you should get a permit. I think one problem so many folks have is that they get told what's wrong with their permit, they fix it, they come back, they get more stuff added to it, they come back, and retroactively things may be applied to it if an ordinance changes. That makes it so people don't want to build here. Everybody wants a P.F. Chang's, everybody wants a Cheesecake Factory. Well, P.F. Chang's came here for a week, rode around with realtors, talked about the coding system or the permitting system, and said, you know what, that's not for us, we're leaving town. I'm okay with making the rules stricter to get a permit, but you've got to follow them. I think that the way to fix almost all of our problems in this town are through good careers for our impoverished people. That means that when Honda Jet wants to come to Tallahassee, as it did a few years ago, we find a way to make it happen. I am not for corporate welfare, but if helping Honda Jet come here had supplied 100 jobs in 32304, the poorest zip code in the state, then it would not have been welfare, it would have been an investment. So with OEV having 17 businesses looking at Tallahassee as a place to come, we had better be willing to embrace them. Now, I'm not talking about a coal plant on Park Avenue, but we have got to change our mindset. If we want to help the poor, we want to help the hungry, but don't change anything about Tallahassee. I mean, at some point you've got to say, well, then what you mean is you want to help the poor as long as it's zero skin off your back. Again, I don't want to hurt the way Tallahassee looks and feels, but my area, Tallahassee, looks and feels good, and there's areas where it looks and feels terrible. And if it takes some sacrifice, we've got to be willing to do that, and we've got to change our image of being a place you don't want to come if you're a business and need to grow.
Commissioner Matlow, same question. If you're reelected, what are you going to do to help Tallahassee become more business friendly?
Sure. I mean, I think if you ask very well-connected businesses, they'll say absolutely it's business friendly. I think if you ask anybody who tried to start something from the ground up and had to go down to City Hall and get bounced around to 15 different departments because nobody knew whose job it was to sign what, nobody knew whose decision-making authority it was what to get a permit, it's a huge problem. Because that was my experience. When I started my business, we went down there with a few $1,000 and a dream. And we were shut down. They almost laughed in our face. I mean, it really became that close, and it took fighting they'd come out, they want new things. They wanted the urinal dividers to be 13 inches instead of 12 inches. And we're here on our last dollars, our last pennies in the bank account, just trying to do something great for our community. Because of our determination and perseverance, we did get through and created over 5 locations to date, employing hundreds of people. But I mean, we are just one story of individuals who almost didn't make it because the city government wouldn't help people get open. And it doesn't necessarily get easier when you're more successful. You know, in current projects we have, I can't go down there and tell them because I'd be on the front page of the newspaper saying I'm misusing my position. But there's not a management structure at the city that understands that your permitting department needs to have somebody who can make connections with the electrical department and make sure connections go through. Instead, they say, we can't do it now. It just gets bounced around forever until somebody comes up with a solution 6-9 months down the line. And so it was one of our biggest issues of OEV. This is exactly what the OEV should be doing, being a liaison for local businesses. When you come through the door, they take you every step of the process till you get your CEO, and they applaud you. I proposed that. It was rejected.
Okay.
It was rejected in favor of a $20 million handout for luxury stadium improvements. That's wrong. That's what we need to change.
Do you want to rebut on that?
Yeah, I think we both agree the permitting system does not work. The difference between the two of us is he's had 4 years to make it better, and I haven't, and it's not any better. And that's not just OEV. I mean, I'm talking the city permitting system that is controlled by the city. I agree, under OEV it gets hard to change anything, but with the city, that is under your leadership.
Okay. Commissioner Matlow, do you support the defund the police policies that we've seen in other municipalities across the country?
So I've had a pretty clear stance on this. I think right now we have to fund our police department to handle the calls that they're getting every day. You know, none of our constituents, if they pick up the phone and nobody comes, would be okay with that. But what I do agree with is we are drastically underfunding a lot of services that can reduce the workload of our police department. That was part of the idea of the mental health initiative. You know, in my neighborhood, we see sworn law enforcement officers have to respond to complaints based on individuals experiencing homelessness. They're not necessarily trained for that. So I do think, yes, we need to fund the responses that are helping people, keeping them out of jail, getting them connected with the resources they need, because not only is that save us money, a whole bunch of money, in the long run, it reduces the crime issues that we're seeing. It provides a stopgap for some of the uncomfortable situations a lot of people find themselves in. So am I saying let's go slash the entire police department and do that first? No, I think you do it first, and then over time, your police department can focus on what we want them focusing on, which is keeping us safe, solving crimes, and reducing violent crime.
Dr. Bellamy?
I think that the police department feels otherwise. I think that there's a chance you've been seen at a defund the police rally. There was a protest at the governor's mansion where you were seen waving your hands up behind the police chief. I think the feeling with them is that you don't support them. I have worked hard to get trust in the community, and I've worked hard to get trust in the police department, and I can work with both of them to make sure that the police do a job that is admired by the citizens. But you've got to support them. He said he came to this group, said he wanted to support law enforcement, make sure that they had what they needed. But every time an agenda comes out, he takes it out of the consent agenda to go over everything that's spent on the police department. Now, some of it maybe shouldn't be spent, but it's not. I don't think that's done on every other issue that comes before the commission. So I think that the actions speak louder than the words in how you feel about law enforcement in our town.
1 minute.
It's hard to unpack how many false statements Dr. Bellamy packed into 1 minute. I haven't routinely pulled consent things, police-related consent items. I did support their union's efforts to get a fair contract. So yes, I have supported law enforcement, but he wants to criticize me for being the only representative of the city of Tallahassee that had the courage to go to a protest and try to ease tensions, I wasn't waving my hand behind the police chief. I was on the phone with the city manager and the police chief asking them to come down and help us ease tensions because it looked like a bad situation was about to unfold. Law enforcement lined up with shields. I stepped in front of them, putting myself between what was an increasingly hostile crowd and law enforcement to try to calm them down, because I believe their issue wasn't with those officers there. Their issues were with the response of our elected officials. So you'll criticize me on one hand saying I'm not willing to meet with people, but then you want to just say a whole swath of people who are upset. And one of the most trying issues we've seen in the last 2 years shouldn't be spoken to at all. I can't get on that type. I think you have to have an open door to everybody if you're going to move the community forward.
Do you want to elaborate on that, Dr. Bellamny?
Just the only picture I saw was one with you behind the police chief with your arms up. Maybe there was one in front of the protest line. I think another thing that shows some disrespect for the police, I think the lawsuit that was showboating against the Blueprint announced the day after a policeman's killed, one of your employees, didn't look very supportive. It looked a little bit insensitive to be doing that showboating with the press release the day after something like that happened.
Silly season has officially begun. Let's go to the next question.
Well, it wasn't silly for Christopher.
Well, we appreciate your answers, and it's our opportunity to to get to see you beyond just a facade of stale questions that are all predictable. So appreciate the respectful interaction that you two are showing us for our benefit. Dr. Bellamy, this question is a spin-off of the police and looking at crime with the Second Amendment. Do you support the Americans' right to own a firearm, to include handguns? And if elected, what gun control policies would you propose, support, or even vote down?
So I believe in the Second Amendment with limitations. I think that gun owners need to start figuring out, are they willing to compromise or are they willing to risk losing everything? Because I think the take it or leave it way of dealing with gun control will end up with them losing everything. So they have got to be realistic with reasonable compromise. If Jeremy or I on the City Commission tried to implement new laws, we would be swiftly arrested because the state has made it so it's illegal for a city to do any kind of gun regulation. So it's kind of a moot point. But if I were able to have any influence over the NRA or gun owners, I would implore them, look for compromises because you risk losing everything if you don't.
Commissioner?
Yeah, Dr. Bellamy is correct. We are largely preempted by the state to take any meaningful actions on guns. I co-signed a lawsuit that was pushing back on that issue because the larger issue we're seeing in Tallahassee is very real, right? And it's firearms that are left in unlocked cars that are being taken and then going and being used in violent crimes. We just had an individual that got his gun stolen, or his gun was used in a crime. When it was traced back to him, he was asked why he didn't report it stolen, because it was his second time it had gotten stolen and returned to him, and he left it in an unlocked car. Do I think it's unreasonable to say we need to look at ways we can stop that type of behavior and there can be a little more personal responsibility in making sure firearms aren't falling into the hands of people who shouldn't have them? Yes, I think we can look at that. When I hear people, buying guns directly off of the street and people realize that that's actually completely legal to have a private sale of a firearm on the street, I think that's something most reasonable people are okay with looking at it. But I don't think people are coming to take guns away. I think people are trying to keep our community safe the best they can.
All right. Got a few more questions, and I'll go to some member questions as well. Start off with you, Commissioner Matlow. Commissions are only as good as the staff who advise them. Okay. So what have you done to improve the performance of city staff? And if reelected, what do you seek to change?
Sure. So in our system of government, our elected officials only oversee our appointed officials. That's our city manager, our city attorney, our inspector general, and our treasurer clerk. So we meet with them routinely on ways we think they can improve. I'll tell the inspector general things that I think need to be brought to light, or maybe he should take a closer look on. I get advice to and from the city attorney. But the largest issue we have right now, and every business owner knows it, is if you have a manager who isn't a strong leader, who can't execute properly what's asked and required of him, and is willing to engage in, frankly, unethical behavior to meet his own ends, for his own gains, there's not a whole lot of room for improvement there. Every business owner knows that sometimes you have to make the tough decision to let somebody go if they're not what's great for the organization. That's where we are with our city manager. And we knew it from day one when his investigation came up with a different conclusion on football tickets than the state's ethics panel did. Why did they see that differently? Because he thought his job was to protect the people who were in luxury skyboxes taking gifts. He didn't see his job as saying, the culture here was bad before and we need to fix it. So I'm not going to let you go, but this is the new honest way of doing things we need. And our community is demanding that. We're seeing it across the board. We have people, breaking down in tears, interviewing with our inspector general and naming Reese Go by name as an individual that's breaking the rules in HR, that's asking them to do things that they don't think are ethical to do. How do you move forward with an individual? You don't. You put somebody at the top of the organization that can lead with integrity and execute the will of the commission and have support of our city. One
more sentence, go ahead.
If I could just have 30 seconds on this, because it's important.
30, okay.
Okay.
Right.
And when I say everybody should have a say in who should be our city manager, I was one of two individuals of the public who were even in the meeting when he was hired, because they didn't want you to know about it. And he doesn't have a mandate from the people who were there. Two of the people who voted to put him in there have now been indicted. If they didn't have a vote, he never would have been the city manager to begin with. Thank you.
Amen. And we'll give 2:30 to Dr. Bellamy if he wants to use it. It's a similar question, Dr. Bellamy, but let me preface it this way. If you are elected and you're now representing seat 3, how much confidence will you have in the city manager advising you on policy?
I expect the city manager to help me fix poverty, crime, and the quality of life for all of Tallahassee. If he can help me do that, I'll gain confidence in him. If he's an obstructionist and can't help, I'll lose all confidence in him and be one of the first to ask him to go. The job of staff is to educate the commissioners so that they can make a good decision. The job of staff is not to lead that discussion towards a particular endpoint. The problem, though, is we have some, I think, that enjoy having staff tell them what to do. But we've also got some that want staff to give them the information, but then they don't invest time learning about it. If you want the information to dissect it yourself, you'd better be willing to invest hours and hours in reading it, not just showing up at a meeting and going off the cuff on what your personal belief is or a national political narrative without having the data. So I think the staff hold a critical role, but they need to understand your job is to inform. One thing I do think I would address with the city manager is I want all of his subordinates feeling comfortable giving him opposing views. I did not like one bit when he threatened the firemen over the public records request. Now, I guess there was some argument how he threatened or did he threaten, but the point is there shouldn't be a discussion. A public records request has two answers. One, it's not public record, you can't have it. Two, it's public record, when do you want to pick it up? Stuff like that I'll make clear that I expect to see him treat all his subordinates with respect.
All right,
I completely agree with that.
We'll give you 30 seconds on
Sure.
this, so we're winding it down. Go ahead.
Sure, I agree with Dr. Bellamy's point on that. But if we want to see that type of change, if we're serious about that, I would submit that Dr. Bellamy filed for the wrong seat. Thank you.
All right, I want to ad-lib here. I'll give you both 30 seconds, starting with you, Commissioner Matlow, on this. What is your position on whether the city manager should be under the Sunshine Law?
The city manager as an individual should not be under the Sunshine Law because that's his job, executing his role as the manager. The problem with the Sunshine Law comes is when you set up a committee and that committee has decision-making authority. That's what's happened at Blueprint, because we need the county to sign on, we need the city to sign on, and we need them to have a conversation to make a recommendation or a decision. And it's not my opinion. The Sunshine Law requires that a committee with that type of authority meet publicly, keep minutes, and the public be able to engage. You know, this came up when Killearn was very upset that the Shamrock extension was going to dump a lot of traffic into their neighborhood. There was a situation where the road
We're
was
approaching a minute now, Commissioner.
the road line was going to be changed, but they couldn't go talk to the IMC because the IMC never met publicly, so they had to skip an entire step in the process. We all have to follow the law, including the IMC.
Dr. Bellamy, did you want to add on any of that? If you can keep to 30 seconds, because
Sorry.
it's going to chew into your closings.
Transparency is always good. Anytime you can be transparent, that's for the best. If the lawyer is right, and when Reese Code and Vince Long meet, it does not have to be public record, then what we need to make certain is that whatever recommendations they make come out far, far in advance, so that the citizens and the commissioners have an opportunity to vet them. I think we have too many times where a week before a vote's to be made, the suggestion comes out. There's no time for discussion, there's no time for the commissioners to learn about it, there's no time for citizens' input. The lawyer for Blueprint, I believe it is, says that when they meet, it doesn't have to be public record. So let's assume that's what the court says. If that's the case, we need to demand earlier release of the recommendations so everybody has an opportunity to be informed and have input.
All right, so I got two more questions that are from the members. Let's have a 1-minute response and then give you up to 2 minutes for your closing comments, okay? So I'll start with Commissioner Matlow. Do you believe that the commission has an obligation? We're talking about the homeless issue, so let me just preface it that. Do you believe the commission has an obligation to provide homeless transitory housing? And if so, where would you place them, in what neighborhoods and what locations? 1 minute, please.
I do, because when I hear from constituents who either have a concern of something that's happening in their neighborhood, or I talk to people who are experiencing homelessness that live on Gain Street, and by the way, one of them got murdered directly across the street from my business, stabbed to death. It's not safe to live on the streets. It's not safe for people to be out there, and it creates all kinds of issues. So my question is, if not us, who? I don't believe the community is satisfied with the response that we have. And what we know from the homeless housing meeting I called last year, where we did get additional funding to address the situations we were seeing during COVID, is like, these aren't large amounts. We could solve this issue today for half of the price that we spent on Doak Campbell Stadium. When you let that sink in of like real concrete issues that we could be solving, it's huge. So yes.
Dr. Bellamy?
Absolutely. The cost to society per homeless person is $1,000 a day. And that seems like a lot, but when you think about the extra police services that are needed that cost the city, the extra EMS services that cost the county, when you think about the lost income for a business that they might be in front of, when you think of the lost property values, throw in medical care. I've had homeless patients in the hospital for 6 weeks over something they could have left in 4 days if they had somewhere to go to. $1,000 a day. So for people who say that doesn't affect me, I don't want to get involved, understand you're spending the money anyhow. Let's spend it in an organized fashion where we can give both the homeless a quality of life and also keep a quality of life for the people that pay for it. I think that we have to figure out a way to have a place where they can live and feel safe. I think that allowing them to live in the woods and group homes is not safe. You wouldn't let a cancer patient say, hey, I'm just going to go live in the woods. I'll call you later. We wouldn't accept that. Why do we allow that of the mentally ill? LA has these big homeless camps, and a few years ago they killed about 60 people with hepatitis A, because you get hepatitis when you live in an encampment with no running water, taking care of bodily functions and then handling food. It's not a humane way to deal with folks, letting them live like that, especially if it's because of a treatable mental illness.
Since you're a doctor, we'll let you have a few extra seconds
All right.
there, talking about a health issue. Last question, and then we'll go to closing comments. And this is one of the questions from our members. The Independent Ethics Board ruled that city commissioners and the mayor who serve on committees as part of their job as a commissioner fall under the authority of the Ethics Board. 3 of 5 commissioners voted against that. What is your position on this ruling? And Dr. Bellamy, I'll start with you.
If your only reason you're on a committee is because you're a city commissioner, that is part of your job as a city commissioner, and you should fall under the ethics committee. I think it was a little weird, though. The question they answered actually was, do we have authority over the county commission? I don't even know why they were discussing that. Does the city have authority over city commissioners when they're on a board that is the only reason you're on that board is because you're a city commissioner? Absolutely, they have authority. It's like Irwin Jackson's, I won't go into it, but Irwin Jackson's got a great point about what if you're a celebrity judge for a kid's science fair and the dad slips you $100 to give the award to his kid, and the only reason you're a judge is because you're a city commissioner.
Commissioner?
And I'm just going to be very...
Let's keep it to a minute, then we'll go to closing.
All right, I want to be very honest about what this was. Yeah, that was just... by the way, I was on the losing vote trying to bring more accountability and more oversight to the Independent Ethics Board. We were voted down on it. And the reason was because political committees like Grow Tallahassee have been using operatives to file false complaints. Every complaint has been struck down. They thought they were trying to do something to harm me, but I welcome the oversight. The CRA needs to have independent ethical oversight. Blueprint needs to have independent ethical oversight. So while they thought they were throwing a punch at me, they realized a lot of people didn't want to see that type of oversight because there's a lot of things that are happening in our city that they don't want an independent board to look on it. So I strongly supported, look, if you're elected on the county, city, CRA,
wrap it up, please,
it doesn't matter. You should follow the same rules everybody else does.
And so we reached the end of the debate, and Commissioner, we'll start with you, and Jackie will do 90 seconds for each closing, please. Commissioner?
Sure. Thank you, Patrick, and just thank everybody for coming out today. Also want to thank Dr. Bellamy for a robust debate. This is what it's about. Let's put our ideas out there. Let's see who can lead our community the way they want it to be led. I love Tallahassee. That's why I ran for office. It wasn't about a job to me. It wasn't about income. It's been a huge personal sacrifice to represent this community. But I grew up here. I was raised by a single mother of 4 kids, and I know the challenges people in poverty are facing. I've started a business in Tallahassee. I know the challenges small business are facing, and largely when we went to City Hall before with these issues, it just fell on deaf ears. They didn't want to hear from the public. They didn't want to hear from the people. I didn't know about it at the time. You had to pay money if you wanted to be listened to, but that was the case. That really is why we weren't being listened to. So I'm proud of everything we've accomplished in the last 4 years. Will I get passionate about exposing wrongdoing? Absolutely, every time, because I believe if we don't fix the underlying issues of our community, the debates we have on different neighborhood things, different business issues, we'll never be able to have an open and honest conversation, because I want your opinion, I want your view represented at the City Commission when we make decisions. So just in closing, thank y'all for being engaged, because most of the population isn't going to come listen to guys like me speak for an hour about issues they might not even know about, right? But it's important. It's all of our jobs to be engaged and vote your heart. Vote who you think will represent this community. Vote who you think is unafraid to push back against wrongdoing. And I hope to have your support. Thank you.
Dr. Bellamy, close us out.
No, I agree, Jeremy. Thanks for a great debate. And they probably listen to you. You've got some authority. They probably don't want to listen to me for an hour. My great-grandfather moved here in 1918 to take over and start the sociology department at FSU. Ended up being a famous guy there, has a building named after him. My grandfather grew up here. My father grew up here. I grew up here. My kids are growing up here. My mother was the mayor, and I learned from her how to serve your community when it's hurting. She had me start serving my community when I was 14 years old, taking me to my first Police Explorer meeting. I was probably the only kid who was 15-year-old doing CPR in front of the Piggly Wiggly years ago on a poor fellow. I have served this community since I was 14. I became a policeman in 1990. I just resigned a couple of weeks ago to avoid the resign to run law, but I was a police officer here for 32 years, and then I became a doctor and served my community through that role. I have taken care of this community and served it for more than half my life, and I'd like to continue doing that. I saw that we had the poorest zip code in the entire state, the highest crime rate in the entire state, and Jeremy came along and said he was going to fix that. He was going to stand up for the poor. He was going to work on crime, and I voted for him, and I just haven't seen it. And for that reason, that's why I'm running. We have got to lose those two monikers of highest crime rate and poorest zip code, and I will wake up every day fighting to fix that, and that is a tide that will raise the entire city.
All right. Please be seated for a second. Two things. One is we're going to collect the ballot, but I also want to make an announcement about a fellow NEBA member. Let's give a round of applause to our candidates, please. Very good job. This is a serious note. We have a member, many of you know, Irene Haley, and we just want to give you our sympathy and our support, Irene, and we're sorry for your loss of your son and your husband. And you're on the minds of many of us here, and so you have our support and prayers. So just thank you. FUMA tonight at 5. See you there. For let's support one of our members and have a good time while we're networking. See you next month. Thank you again.
All right.
All right. Good seeing you. Yeah, you too.